in Beirut today. There is, of course, growing concern. Escalating tensions between the two could jeopardize the U.S.-Iran peace deal. Senior international correspondent, chief international correspondent, Trey Yanks. On the spot. Well-deserved, obviously. Trey has been very busy. He has the very latest from Tel Aviv. And I understand, Trey, you have a better Rolodex than I do. You've actually had a chance to chat with the commander-in-chief. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Kevin, good afternoon. I just spoke with President Trump. He tells Fox News he believes a deal with Iran will be signed in the next 2 to 3 hours. I asked him about the Israeli strikes earlier today against Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. He tells me he spoke on the phone with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, asking him, "What the F are you doing?" He told the Prime Minister not to conduct additional strikes against Hezbollah so that it doesn't affect this deal from moving forward. Now, the Israelis are bracing for the possibility of incoming Iranian ballistic missile fire, according to the IDF. And President Trump tells Fox News he will ask Iran not to respond with missile fire toward Israel, with this deal on the horizon expected to be signed tonight. All of this taking place amid the backdrop of these latest conversations to get this final agreement across the finish line. The president talked about the strikes in the middle of last week when he was hammering many of those Iranian positions, pushing the Iranians back to the negotiating table. You might remember, Kevin, I was on the phone with the president as he was in the Situation Room, and the Iranians called him and asked him to stop the bombing. The president believes that moment was able to shift the equation and again get the Iranians to make these concessions. President Trump says if they sign the deal tonight, he will immediately order the blockade on Iranian ports to be lifted and then move forward into these more detailed discussions as it relates to Iran's nuclear program. But again, the latest headlines that we know here, President Trump telling Fox News he believes a deal with Iran will be signed in the next 2 to 3 hours. This will take place electronically, the president says. And then a week from now, there is expected to be an in-person signing that could take place somewhere in Europe. Again, the president responding after those Israeli strikes today against the Lebanese capital of Beirut. The Israelis were striking a Hezbollah position in response to drone fire over the border this weekend into northern Israel. Again, the president telling Fox News he asked the Israeli prime minister, "What the F are you doing?" Kevin?
That sounds very much like what the president would certainly say. But at the same time, Trey, I think it's fair to point out that if you're the Israeli government, you have every right to defend your citizens who have been under constant attack by way of Hezbollah. I guess a two-part question. One, can you understand why the Israelis would certainly feel that way very strongly, that they need to respond? And two, is Hezbollah being directed, in your opinion, by Tehran?
The answer to both of your questions is yes. The Israelis have come under a variety of both rocket and drone attacks into the northern part of their country. Tens of thousands of Israelis have been displaced from their homes since Hezbollah got directly involved in this conflict. And they've been firing not on military targets, but on civilians. Now, Israeli forces remain in southern Lebanon. And there's a parallel effort going on here by the Trump administration, led by President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to create a normalization agreement between Israel and Lebanon, because they have a common goal here to disarm Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is Iran's largest proxy in the region. And the Iranians have been trying to tie the situation in Lebanon to this broader agreement with the United States that, again, is expected to be signed in a matter of hours. And so there's a lot of things on the table right now, but when we step back and look at what is taking place at this very moment, the Israelis say they are preparing for the possibility of incoming Iranian missile fire. And we should look just to last week. 1 week ago, the Iranians launched 30 ballistic missiles at Israel in response to a similar strike against the Dakhia neighborhood of southern Beirut. And there was an exchange of fire at that moment. And then ultimately, President Trump took to Truth Social and he called on both sides to stop shooting. And again, this is an indication that the president has the ability to get directly involved here, to pause what's happening in the region in order to let these diplomatic efforts play out. And that's exactly what is taking place tonight. Kevin, President Trump tells me he was getting on the phone just moments after we spoke to ask the Iranians not to fire in response at Israel and ultimately allow this agreement to be electronically signed to enter into these deeper negotiations as it relates to Iran's nuclear program. Remember, we're looking at two separate issues here, but they are connected. One has to do with the Strait of Hormuz. And we understand once this agreement is signed, the strait will be opened, the blockade on Iranian ports will be lifted, and that's going to address the international transit issue in the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. And then you have the issue of Iran's nuclear program. A lot of that, as the president calls nuclear dust, the highly enriched uranium, was buried deep underground in the aftermath of Operation Midnight Hammer that actually took place a year ago to this week, last summer. And that was an effort by those B-2 bombers to destroy Iranian nuclear facilities. But when that happened, it buried that highly enriched uranium deep underground. And so there will be efforts to eventually remove and destroy that highly enriched uranium, but there are only two countries that can do it, according to President Trump. That's the United States, and that's China. I do want to just quickly go back to the Strait of Hormuz because the president gave Fox News some other interesting information. Over the past month and a half, there were questions about how the oil markets were stabilized, despite the fact that there was an exchange of fire often taking place in the Persian Gulf. And there was this secret mission going on that President Trump ordered to get vessels that had millions of barrels of crude oil on board from these Gulf countries out through the Strait of Hormuz. And President Trump tells Fox News an average of 22 ships per night were taken out during that U.S. operation. And it gives you a sense of what was going on behind the scenes. There was a lot of speculation in the media about what was going to take place and a lot of comments from Iranian leadership about what it actually looked like in the Strait of Hormuz. But while those Iranian officials were talking, the U.S. Navy was escorting all of these vessels out of the Gulf and ensuring that those oil prices were stabilized. Kevin?
Of course, Trey, we'll bring you back as you get more information on what could be a momentous afternoon here, not just for the country, but for the entire globe. Trey Yanks, as always. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate that.